Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I've had some pretty hair-raising experiences while caving, but there was one thing my crew and I found in an old abandoned mine that really freaked us out. So, picture the scene. We're just about ready to leave this place near Nuttleburg Mines down in West Virginia, when my buddy finds this one crawl tunnel we hadn't explored yet. He's like my mini-me, about a whole foot and a half shorter. We usually just give him a good ribbing for it, but good God, if he can't reach places we can't during caving adventures. He crawls through with his phone in hand, ready to take pictures of anything cool he sees. Suddenly, we hear him say, "Oh my God, bro." We're all like, "What? What is it, dude?" But he just keeps going. What in the actual F? Who would? And we're going crazy, asking him, "Dude, what do you see? Take a picture." Barely able to contain our excitement, but he calls back, "I don't think you all want to see this." We thought he was hyping it up, so naturally, we did want to see what he was talking about. We see some flashes of him taking pictures, then he crawls back to us and says, "We need to get out of here, right now." We're practically demanding he show us the pictures, and he's totally refusing, looking over his shoulder like, let's go. We gotta move." Only when we're at a safe distance away and near the car does he actually get his phone out to show us what he'd seen. And, yep, he was right. In fact, I don't think we ever should have gone near that place in the first place. The first thing he shows us, and I'll do my best to describe it, but forgive me if it sounds nuts, was a picture of a bunch of crow wings arranged like a star, maybe 8 or 9 of them, tied or glued together somehow. In the middle was an eye, maybe from a sheep or goat, and it looked embalmed somehow. It was all glassy, shiny, and kind of yellow with age, but it was obviously preserved. It looked like a talisman or something. But what came next was even worse. Someone had caught and killed a bunch of small animals, mice, frogs, fish, small birds, all kinds of things. Then they skinned them, deboned them, and embalmed them somehow, all before tying or gluing them back together in ways that were far from random. I remember seeing a dried fish head stuck to the body of a rat or mouse, and whoever was crazy enough to do that had added frog's legs near the mouse's tail. It was weird, but it looked kind of dumb, like it had this weird, mad scientist vibe to it. We even had a few nervous giggles over it. But the next one changed the mood completely. Ted, the guy who crawled in and took the pictures, his real name's Rob, but we call him Stunted, so Ted for short, was still freaked out because he'd seen everything with his own eyes. He was pretty focused when he showed us the next one, wanting us all to be in the same headspace. And, my God, did it work. The guy had made some kind of doll, assuming it was a guy. It usually is, right? Like how most serial killers are guys. He'd rearranged a rat skeleton to be standing upright, straightening the legs, bending the spine back. I don't know how, but the skull looked like it was smiling or something. I figured it was just the natural way the jaw was set, but even so, that wasn't the creepiest part. On its head was a bushy, fur-type thing, and I'm almost certain it was made of spiders or some kind of crawling insect. Then, and this bit really messed with me, I think the guy had skinned and tanned the hide of whatever rodent it was, then dressed the skeleton with it again. It had a little dress and even something like a tube top. I swear, I've never seen anything so freaky in my entire life, not even in the most messed up Korean horror movie. Ted was so disturbed that he actually deleted his own photos of the things. I asked if he'd send them over, since my brother didn't believe me, and come to think of it, most people probably don't believe me either. But he'd already deleted them. He said even having that kind of stuff on his phone felt like a curse, like it might lead whoever made them back to him. I told him that was just paranoia talking, but honestly, if I'd been face to face with that stuff, I might have felt the same. People who do stuff like that to animals, they're usually itching to do it to a person. And that's the big lesson from serial killers: messing with animals is just a test run or a build-up to something worse. I don't really care if people believe me or not. I have nothing to prove, and I'm not insecure enough to feel the need to convince anyone. Besides, I'm always satisfied when listeners promise they'll never go near abandoned mines in West Virginia, or anywhere else for that matter. I can promise you, there's way worse stuff than coal dust and pitfalls down there, stuff that I don't think even the smartest psychologist could ever explain. My family's lived here in Kentucky since before we kicked the British out. It's almost 300 years of calling these hills home. We haven't always had it easy, but we're darn proud of our heritage. And although we keep our fair share of tradition, a lot's changed over the years. To me, the biggest change is what we do for a living. My dad, may he rest in peace, drove trucks for a living. Me and my brother, on the other hand, we work in fast food and IT, respectively. But our grandpappy, he was a miner. He's become kind of a legend in our family for obvious reasons. Dude spent 6 days a week down in a deep, dark pit, working his butt off so all of his kids could have a better life. And you know what? It worked. Not a single member of our family worked the mines after he did, as he basically made it off limits for us. But that's not so much because it was backbreaking work, more because of something he experienced down there when he was still just a teenager. So, like I touched on, Grandpappy started working the mines when he was basically still a kid. Sure, I thought 17 was incredibly grown up when I was that age, but then you hit 30 and realize, yeah, at 17, you're still a freaking baby. He was just a kid going to work with grown men, dudes double or sometimes almost triple his age. Not only that, but our family isn't exactly known for our stature, a clan of baby faces we are, but tall we are not. So as you can guess, those first few weeks were real intimidating for him. And on top of that, the meanest SOB in the whole place took an instant disliking to him. And as bad as that sounds, Grandpap had no idea what kind of doom that spelled for him. This guy's name was like Tex or Rex or something, but everyone called him Arthur since that was his second name. Arthur was a bully. He'd borrow money from guys, and they just knew they'd never get it back. But it was either give it to him, or you were the one he was picking a fight with down at the bar come Friday night. Trouble was, there was no firing the guy. He hauled more coal out of that mine than anyone. And when Arthur was on shift, there was considerably less horseplay. So as much as the bosses knew everyone hated him, Arthur was making the owners a ton of cash, so getting rid of him was completely out of the question. And as the story goes, Arthur took a creepy liking to my grandpa. The exact nature of that liking is something that's not really gone into detail about, and if you ask me, that's for good reason. But I always got the feeling that it was like a Shawshank Redemption / The Sisters kind of liking. If you get the reference, cool. If you don't, well, good for you. Never lose your innocence. Anyway, Grandpappy was warned by a lot of coworkers, never let Arthur get you alone. But they never told him exactly why. Being a smarter kid, he didn't ask too many questions, he just did as they advised. But from what I understand, it was only a matter of time before his luck ran out. The way my dad tells the story, at the end of one of their shifts, Arthur walked up to one of the pit bosses, then whispered something in his ear. The pit boss looked like he'd seen a ghost, then walked right over to my grandpappy, who's still 17 at the time, and told him he needed to go back down into the mine to fetch a length of cable that someone had forgotten. Now, right away, you can probably tell that something's wrong here. It's just a piece of cable, right? No reason why the next shift couldn't grab it when they went down, and it was a mine, for Christ's sake, they had cable for days. Why get all antsy over one little piece? But again, my grandpap wasn't one to ask too many questions, so he does as the pit boss told him and headed back down to the mine to fetch the cable. He walks down into the dark, spends a few minutes looking for the piece of cable, but can't find anything. Then, just as he's about to turn back to tell his pit boss that he can't find the cable, his way is blocked by, you guessed it, Arthur. Arthur tells him not to move and not to scream. If he did, he was going to have an accident, quote unquote. My grandpa knew better than to try and fight Arthur, and he also knew better than to scream loud underground. Besides, Arthur had this absolutely terrifying presence, and almost everything he said had the undertone of "do it or I'll snap your neck." My grandpa must have been shaking like a leaf as he slowly approached, and I imagine he felt sick to his stomach as Arthur told him to close his eyes. He did, and I'm guessing he didn't know what was coming, only that it was going to be bad. He waited and waited, just hoping whatever it was going to be would be over quick. But nothing happened. Then he opens his eyes, and Arthur is gone. I'm guessing he breathed this huge sigh of relief, thinking whatever just happened was part of some nasty prank. Grandpappy knew that Arthur liked to scare people, so maybe he'd just gotten his fear fixed, then snuck back up to the surface to yuck it up with the rest of the crew. He was pretty livid as he walked back up to the surface, thinking he just had a prank pulled on him. But when he gets there, here's the last question he expected to hear. "Hey, Watson, where's Arthur?" Obviously, Grandpappy had no idea and tells the guy he figured Arthur had walked out of the mine. And that's when he realizes no one had seen Arthur re-emerge. They'd seen him walk down after my grandpa, all right, and they knew better than to say anything or to try and stop him. The thing is, they never saw him come back out. My grandpa was the last one to see him down there. When they're asking him, "Where's Arthur?" and my grandpappy is saying he didn't know, they all start laughing, like, "Aha, kid, but seriously, where is he?" But grandpa had to tell them that he didn't know, that Arthur had just basically disappeared. When folks realized that, a gang of miners went right back down into the mine to look for Arthur, all the while my grandpa was interrogated on where Arthur went. It seemed unbelievable that my grandpa would be able to defend himself against Arthur, so it's no surprise that no blood or body was found down there. But the fact that he just seemed to have totally disappeared had people more than just scratching their heads. People quickly went from head scratching to straight up terrified since, like I said, Arthur had basically disappeared. He didn't have any family, so there's no one to kick up a stink about it. The only folks that really cared were the mine's management, who wanted to prevent more stuff like that happening. And then the cops. Cops showed up, questioned my grandpa, but all he could tell them was the same thing he told everyone else. One second, Arthur was there, the next second, he was gone. They asked him if there was a bang, a fall, a scream, anything that might give them a clue as to what happened. But my grandpa just repeated, "There one second, gone the next." The way my dad explains it, Grandpa was scared he was going to be arrested for murder or something, so he didn't much care what had actually happened to Arthur, only that he proved he had nothing to do with it. It wasn't until much later that he really started to wonder. It started with one of the other miners telling him something like, "Hey, good job with Arthur. Guy was always a bully." But what is it you did, exactly? All Grandpappy could do was repeat the line about him not having touched the guy. But no one in that camp was ever satisfied by that answer. Then there were the old-timers who told him that the knockers took Arthur. The knockers are supposed to be these weird little monsters who live in the mines. Some of the older generation used to believe in them like the gospel, but it can't be anything more than a myth. The legend says that the knockers were mostly just mischievous, stealing miners' gear if they put stuff down and turned their back. That's obviously just a cover for miners with sticky fingers, like, "It wasn't me that stole your lamp oil, it was the knockers." But legend also says that they would help lost or trapped miners by guiding them to the surface. They'd do this by knocking on the walls of the mine shaft, so all you'd hear in the dark was knock, 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 and if you had the guts to follow the sound, you'd be saved. Basically, knockers are supposed to be little rascals with hearts of gold, and that's why the old-timers thought the knockers had saved my grandpappy. Or rather, they didn't just think they saved him, they figured they took Arthur, just like they took stuff that wasn't nailed down. Another reason my grandpa didn't really question the whole thing was that everyone was extra nice to him after that. I've been into caving for quite some time now, but not in the way you might think. I got stuck a little while back, and it really scared me. So I only ever explore things like abandoned mines now, places where I can actually walk through without fear of getting stuck. I find it's just as creepy and exciting without all the dangers. This one time, my girlfriend, now wife, and I were exploring an abandoned lead mine located in the old lead mine belt here in our home state, Missouri. We entered via an adit, what we call the entrance to a mine, much lower down the hillside than the regularly used entrance, so we could see the lower workings that aren't normally accessible from the higher adit. After a few minutes walking deeper into the mine, we came to what I thought was the base of a stope, a narrow, steep incline that I had seen before from the upper entrance. Making my way along this for about 20 or 30 yards, I found myself marveling at the flowstone deposits. But I should have been watching where I was going, because I suddenly felt the floor of the stope start to buckle under my weight. The stope was covered in centuries of mud and debris, as is normal in mines, but solid mud or earth doesn't just buckle, right? What does buckle like that is wood, old, rotten wood. It suddenly hit me that I wasn't at the base of the stope. I was actually on an old wooden false floor. And I had absolutely zero clue how far down the drop was. It could have been 4 feet, or it just as easily could have been 40. Either way, I got this quivery, sick feeling that screamed, I'm about to die, or at least get extremely hurt. It took everything I had in me to keep calm and gently retrace my steps back up the stope. I felt like I was on a frozen lake, and all the ice around me was slowly cracking. It was just a matter of time before I'd fall, and everything would go black. Looking back, it's hard to get my head around the fact that all that stood between me and the great beyond was a bunch of 100-plus-year-old half-rotten wood. How or why it didn't just crumble into splinters under my weight, I'll never know. All I know is that when I finally felt solid rock underneath me again, it was like every birthday I'd ever had combined, pure relief, like nothing I've felt before or since. After that, my wife and I backed away from the stope and headed toward the surface. I was still shaking when we walked back out into the daylight, so scared I could barely get the words out to tell her what had happened. She was pretty freaked out too, asking, "What happened? What did you see?" When I could finally tell her, she just brought me in for a big hug, because she knew exactly what I must have been feeling. I already knew I wanted to marry her, but that little incident just confirmed it. The fact that she was there for me after the scariest moment in my life sealed the deal. Anyway, I hope I managed to paint a picture of how terrifying that day was for me. But even if this story sucked, me and my wife, Emma, are so grateful for all your hard work. We are, and always will be, proud members of the Buttersock cult. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.